Writing XRio Converter for an overcurrent relay. To write XRio Converter file in the test object page, first you need to add a block. To begin, right-click on Custom Block and select Add Block. Also, you can use Ctrl-B combined key to add a block. Likewise, another block is added to the subset of Custom Block. Then the blocks should be named. To rename the blocks, right-click on Custom Block and select Rename Block. 7SJ62 is selected as the name for this block, which is an example of an overcurrent relay. It should be noted that you can also use F2 shortcut key to rename a block. The blocks Block 1 and Block 2 are named Relay Parameter Section and additional information respectively according to the relay menu. After naming them, you should specify ID, name, etc. for each of the blocks by double-clicking on 7SJ62 block on Rio Parameter Viewer page. ID custom and name 7SJ62 are specified. You can also specify description, custom defined relay parameters, foreign ID, and comment for this block. In the Enabled section, by selecting Enable, it is specified that this block is active. Then click on OK to save the changes. Likewise, double-click on Relay Parameters section and specify ID setting. Also, for the additional information block, specify ID, add underline param. It should be noted that only capital letters are accepted as ID, and it is not possible to use characters such as parentheses, brackets, slash, etc. The only character allowed is underline. Next, the Relay Parameter section block is selected and 3 more blocks are added to its subset. The first block is named Device Config, and by double-clicking on it, IDDC is specified. To add a parameter to this block, right-click on it and select Add Parameter. Then select the parameter type from the options available in the enumeration on the parameter type window. Then the list of enumerations of this parameter are specified on Edit Enumeration Items window, and for each enumeration, ID and value are entered. For example, the first enumeration with ID TXT underline 1, 101 and value disabled. The second enumeration with ID TXT underline 2 underline 101 and value definite time. And the third enumeration with ID TXT underline 1 underline 101 and value time over current are specified. By clicking on OK, this parameter is added to the box on the right side and a name and ID should be specified for it. By double-clicking on a state column, Rio Parameter Viewer window opens and ID OC underline 101, name 50/51 and description time over current are specified for the parameter. Next, rename the second block to Power System Data and by double-clicking on it, specify IDPS. Then add another block named CTs with ID CT to the subset of this block. Now add a real type parameter to this block. Real type is used for parameters with numerical value. By double-clicking on State column on this window, specify ID CT underline primary, name CT primary, value 300, minimum value 10, maximum value 5000, and unit ampere for the parameter. This time, add an enumeration type parameter and specify 2 enumerations with ID TXT underline 1 underline 201, value 1 ampere, ID TXT underline 2 underline 201, and value 5 ampere. Then, by double-clicking on State column, specify ID CT underline sec and name CT secondary. Now, to proceed, press F2 button and rename the third block to Setting Group. And by double-clicking on it, specify ID SG. By using Ctrl-B combination key, add another block to the subset of this block and name it 50/51. Then double-click on it and specify ID underline 50 underline 51 for this block. Add 2 more blocks with the names of 50 and 51 to the subset of this block and specify ID underline 50 and ID underline 51 for them respectively. In the 50 block, which includes the function 50, add time delay 50 and pick up 50 parameters according to the aforementioned information. As an example, for pickup 50 parameter, information such as ID, pickup underline 50, and name pickup 50 are specified on Rio Parameter Viewer window. Likewise, add 2 parameters to block 51. After adding these two parameters with names of pickup 51, time dial 51, you should add another parameter in which curve function 51 is specified. This parameter is of enumeration type with two enumerations and with ID txt underline 1 underline 51, value normal inverse, ID txt underline 2 underline 51, and value very inverse. Then double-click on State column and specify ID curve underline 51 and name IEC underline curve. Add a block named relay information with ID RI to the subset of additional parameter block. In this new block, information such as time and current tolerances are entered which are specified according to the manual of the relay. To do this, press Ctrl P, select a real type parameter and specify ID I underline TOL underline ABS1 and name I tolerance ABS for this parameter, and then according to this manual of the relay, specify 10 milliampere as its value. Add more parameters to this block with names of operate time, T-tolerance rel, T-tolerance ABS, I-tolerance ABS5, and I-tolerance rel5. The information related to these parameters is mentioned on each line. So far, the information about relay parameters section and additional information for overcurrent function is provided simply and briefly. Also, the structure of XRio Converter is completely covered. Now, whether these blocks are enabled should be determined.